I guess you. We're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna turn this up just a touch. All right, there we go. So welcome to our farm. My wife Lindsay's back there in one of the blue shirts. Guys, the goal of today is for you guys to see just a real farm, how we use it. It's not spit polish, it's not anything. If you get to looking, and we've got a terrace channel not very far down those rows where the corn flooded out, it is what it is, right? And that's our goal, is just to show how you can do some out-of-the-box things and do it in a way you don't have to change your operation. You can just dovetail it right in, okay? That's what we're after. There are several things that I want to make sure you guys see while you're here today, and I'm going to point them out. First of all, we have a variety plot. I'm not going over that. It's there for you to see. It's some cool things. We have a white corn out there. I jokingly say it looks pretty yellow. That's because it was white hens and a yellow rooster, okay? So it's a dual color white corn. Guys, I want to point out the posters on the right that have the white background. So those are off of this farm taken last December. And that's the whole purpose of this, is to learn, okay? And if you'll notice on the left one, we circled the P&K levels. I want you to notice what they were, and then I want you to go over in Midwest Labs. I want you to notice what they recommended to raise a 200 bushel crop. And then I want you to go over to the right, and some of you have seen those, some of you haven't. It's called a Haney, or a soil health calculation, right? Soil health test. And you'll see what they recommended in the middle, but then when they take our biological activity and what we've got going on in our soil, we didn't need to put any P&K down according to their test. We used litter, which is our primary.
Turn mine on.
Hold on just a second. I get calls, people trying to find it, and I'm gonna let somebody give directions here. Guys, I get this question often, and that is, I keep putting fertilizer down and my soil tests aren't moving, okay? There is a way to make that fertilizer you're putting down, that dry fertilizer, more available. We're going to be sharing that with you, okay? Ken's going to have, between the soil pit and this, about an hour's worth of really good information, and then we're going to a farmer panel. We believe one of the best ways to learn is from people that are in the trenches doing this, and that's our goal here. So, and then, does anybody have, can I see your book there? If you don't do anything else, or show me stay, right? Pictures. This is from this growing season, okay? So the last basically 90, 120 days. And these are real world pictures from this area. And several of you, it's from your fields. But we just put that together to help understand a little better what we've got going on. So with that, we know it's going to be crowded around the soil pits, but we wanted to do it before it got any hotter than it is. And so Ken, would you come up there? So this is Ken Musselman. We're very fortunate to have him here, him and his wife Cindy today. Ken has been very patient with me over the years. He is my primary mentor in this business. And if you can just gather a sliver of what he's able to offer, I think you'll go away with something you can use on your farm this year. But Ken, where do you want to start, or how do you want to go first here?
You just want to go to the soil pit and get started, or
yeah. You want to go to the far one and work back?
Yeah, let's do that.
So we're going to go to the far one. We realize it's going to be hard for everybody to get around and see it. We're going to do the best we can. We're not going to have a microphone, so bear with us, but feel free to ask questions. Our goal is to do this over the next roughly 30 minutes and then come on back if we need that much time. So anything else? Or?
No.
Okay. Let's head on down to the soil pit. Okay. Good turn. I'm very happy about that. Got my energy drink too, brother. What do you think of that cute little can? Isn't that cute? My wife made me do it. What do you think of that purple corn? Interesting, huh?
I think we've got several guys.
Did you warn Mike you were going to put him to work?
I did.
Okay.
You want to introduce Mike?
I had the opportunity to be on some of your farms with Mike this summer, and the agronomic expertise that he brings has really added a lot of value. And Mike, as you know, we're gonna pick on this purple and a couple other things. I'll let you kind of explain what's going on because I'm not sure. So, but anyway, Ken, I'll let you take it from there. And I do want to point out one thing, I guess. We brought you to this pit because we were going to put trials here, and things started failing miserably later in July. And it wasn't right where the trial was, it was the whole area of the field. And there's a terrace that goes along here. We run into this a lot in this part of the state. And so soil type, water table, etc. And so we said, you know, let's figure out what went wrong. So Ken, I'll let you take it from there, bud.
Okay. Well, one of the neat things when you dig a soil pit, you can kind of see what you're working with, what kind of soil the crop has to grow up. First thing you notice is a color change about right here. You know, it's darker here in the A horizon, and then you get a mixture of colors. Why is this darker? Don't be bashful.
Organic matter.
Organic matter, yeah, that's what makes it darker. That's what makes soils productive. Derek was kind of giving me a hard time. He said, well, these aren't Illinois soils. And I told him, well, they're not Indiana soils either, where I grew up and farmed. So, you know, to have 8 inches of fairly dark soil, what is the organic matter here?
I think a 2.8 if I remember right.
It's, 2's kind of a magic number in my mind. If you get below that, it just makes things a challenge. If we can get to 3 and above, you're in kind of another level yet. So why are Illinois and Iowa soils so productive? They have a lot of organic matter. In some places, it's pretty deep in the soil. One thing we want to talk about today is over time, you can darken the soils on your farm. And you do that by increasing the organic matter. And that is largely, well, it's almost entirely a biological process. So we'll be talking more about that as the day goes on. But once you get below that, you know, the soil's tighter, it has a higher clay content. The organic matter has water holding capacity, but it also makes the soil much easier to work. It's less sticky than clay is. And when you get here and you start to see some coloring, the reds and orange and yellows, that's a sign that it's somewhat poorly drained. And then when you get into just the gray clay, you know, it's poorly drained at that depth. But one thing that's neat about digging a pit along a corn plant, we can see some of the roots. This is actually a small fraction of what's under these plants. You know, he dug with the backhoe, and then I've been in here picking with the knife. And you can see most of the roots are concentrated up here in the top, basically 6 inches. And I'd say that's how deep his aerobic zone is. When we say aerobic zone, we're talking about soils that have enough oxygen that support the beneficial microbes in the soil. And that takes pore space. And that's created by having enough calcium to flocculate clays, and then biologically by microbes gluing individual soil particles together into water-stable soil aggregates. And that's what gives you the coffee ground crumb structure. So here I stuck my knife in and pulled it up. You know, it's pretty tough till you get up to here, and then it just, you know, real easy. In that line between the two, you know, you're aerobic here and anaerobic down here. There's just not enough oxygen to support this level of biological activity and organic matter formation. But we also like to just kind of keep picking away, and here's a pretty good sized root down here. You know, they're harder to find once you get below about 18 inches, but there's some all the way down here. And one thing I wanted to point out, right here, I know most of you can't see it.
Are you going to point out the black streak?
Yeah, that's what I'm...
Yeah, this was cool. I didn't know this till last night.
There's a black streak right here. What is that black streak? It's still organic matter. How did it get there? One of two ways. Either an earthworm dug a channel and some soil ended up down there, or more likely it's a corn root or some other root that went down deep and then decayed there. And so that's one way we can build soils deeper in the profile, by getting more roots in there and having them decay and turn into organic matter. So that's pretty neat when you see those dark streaks through your subsoil. When we get to the next pit, it's not going to be that prevalent because the soil's darker in general.
One thing I'd like to point out is just kind of notice generally the crop, what it looks like, the plant, the ear, everything. And then when we go up to the other soil pit, to kind of pay attention to what the crop looks like in relation to the soil. But Mike, I'm going to pick on you a little bit, bud. I brought this around to show Ken last night, and I'd kind of like to hear your take. What do you think has happened here? And by the way, it showed up about 2 weeks ago is when I noticed it.
It was a little dry.
It was.
So, I mean, if you think about it, the corn plant is basically a factory. It takes raw materials and makes a finished product. And if you look at what is in a corn plant, it is primarily carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And if you put those together in the right ratio, it makes C6H12O6. Anybody know what that is? Sugar. And basically what's happening is, at this time, this stage of the corn, we call it the source-sink relationship. So the sink is the grain. We're trying to fill the grain. And if you have highly productive factories that are making more product than they can shove into the sink, the grain, they have to store the extra somewhere. And it is stored in the form of something called anthocyanin. And that reddish color is anthocyanin buildup. You'll see it on the stalks where the sugar content has essentially settled into those places. Basically, the plant is storing it so that it can use it later if it needs it. It's made it, doesn't want to get rid of it. There is a little bit of exudate that is sort of what plays into this aerobic zone, but primarily that's what that is. It is just the source sink relationship and storing extra sugars that it's made. Typically associated with really dry times. When it's dry, the corn plant can still make a lot of sugar, even though because it's got a lot of nutrients, it can remobilize and all of those things. That would.
Thank you. The other thing I was going to point out, so being in a field tile business for 20-some years, I got to see a lot of different soil types and things happening. Of course, I preach seep tile, right? That was what we did, and this has some, but not right here. But it's hard to see from down here. But when I got on the backhoe last night, I can see that strip that follows kind of the terrace and the contour of the hill, and so I think this has some correlation with what's happening underneath more so. That's why you don't see as much purple as you go that way, or once you get way over it. So just want to point that out. But okay, well, any other questions here? We'll go on to the other pit.
What was the milk line here, Derek?
So this is replant corn. I do want to point that out. The test plot, the yield plot up there, I didn't replant it because I was kind of lazy. I probably should have by replanting the rest of the farm. So that is going to be probably 23-25% corn up there. This here, the milk line was, what was it, 80-90% probably?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, and where we're going to look at this other corn, we might want to keep that in mind. Oh, look, I'll be able to tell you if it's the replant or not. So, so anyway, good questions. Okay, guys, nothing else, we'll sneak up to the other pit there and take a look.
You do cover crop?
We do. Yeah, we cover crop each year. This now I'm not a hardcore cover cropper, and what I mean by that is most of the time I'll terminate mine when they're pretty small.
Still do where they put tiles in.
Just because that's how my management style works.
Blow air back like
Next year it'll get a little bigger because I'm going to be no-tilling more this next year. This year I had to get rid of my
familiar with that.
cultivator furrows.
We've done it one field, one year.
Kind of keep that in mind, right?
Because
Yeah, watch these
place easy to get to with power.
Yeah.
And you could see it.
Do you remember me?
I do. do, but I'll be honest.
a better crop. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I know the face, but I was blanking on the names. So, yeah, good.
I've been watching you on Facebook.
Oh, goodness. Cheap entertainment.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
But no,
The one that shows the sap test. Yeah, right.
Some areas where it's really
I really want to know how your beans do different, if they do different, or just good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you I've been out there twice with 2 different sets of agronomists. We've pulled tests off of it.
Air and water, man.
Most of this is 6202.
Excuse me here.
Yep. Most of it's 6202.
This organic farm?
We are doing this as non-GMO this year. Yep. Most of it is untreated though. Like I did a
Lot on fertility, for how many years? 70 years we focused on NPK fertility. We always worry about our nutrients, but I get on a lot of farms and the most limiting thing is air in the soil. Air and water management is huge. And a lot of that has to do with soil tilt at the surface. Calcium plays a big role in that. Years ago, there was a crop consultant in Indiana, Don Schriefer, and he said, don't let your crop get caught with the roots up. In other words, he wanted to find practices that would get roots down into the moisture. And the other thing that happens with poor soil tilth, water will move up by capillary action until it hits a change in particle size or density. It moves up by hydraulic conductivity. So when you have a compaction layer here, if it's severe enough, your roots can't penetrate to get down, and then as the soil dries out, it comes up to here and can't get through that water moisture. So the water can't come up and the roots can't go down, and you're in trouble in a dry situation. Now if we have good soil tilth, the roots can go down and the water can come up into the root zone. A lot of people are concerned about tillage and losing moisture, and that's true. If you till 2 inches deep, you're going to lose your moisture in those 2 inches. But actually in dry periods, as that water comes up, it hits this change in density, and it's like an insulation barrier there that actually holds moisture in. Do you have to till to accomplish that? No. If we have good enough crumb structure here naturally through organic matter accumulation and biological formation of soils, then we can get that nice crumb structure on top that acts like an insulation barrier that just keeps your water from coming up to the surface and evaporating. Any comments or questions on that?
So is there any truth behind, like if you take a penetrometer and if it goes over 150, it won't let any air go through it after that?
It's definitely harder, and it's harder for roots to penetrate too. But one thing you have to realize when you're running a penetrometer, and you don't have to have one with a needle on it that tells you can take a tile probe and fill the same layers, but soil moisture is huge. So you can't go and stick a probe in this field today and it doesn't rain for 2 weeks and come back and go to a different spot and compare it to what you did here. You have to have equal soil moisture.
Good point.
So a lot of times in the summer you dig a pit like this and the ground's dry, and then you can't hardly break those clay particles apart, and you think, how did roots get down here? Well, probably most of the roots got through that earlier in the season when there was moisture and less resistance for roots to penetrate.
How much would cultivating at knee high, does that help that?
It can. Again, if you leave a mulch of loose soil on the surface, it can. The other neat thing about cultivating, if you throw a ridge of soil up here, you've artificially added 2 inches of aerobic zone just by cultivation. And that can be pretty neat. See the activity, biological activity on these roots up here. We'll talk more about that in the slide presentation. But you can see here the dark soil goes much deeper and we don't have as much discoloration in the subsoil. You know, here's a pretty good sized root still going at this depth. There's pretty good diameter to it. Most of you probably can't see that. But roots are easier to find here than they were in the other hole, because this is a more productive soil type. But again, this is just a fraction of the total root mass, but I've kind of picked away so you can see some of the roots coming through. But again, the majority of them are in this top 6 inches that's more aerobic, has better soil tilth and structure. Mike or Derek, anything to add?
I think you pretty much covered it. Not anything we're not going to cover here in a little bit anyway. But I think it's kind of obvious just to see what happens below is probably about as important as anything above.
What happens below explains what you see above.
It really does. It really does. So
how quick will your cover recycle itself? Like in the spring when you're planting with heavy cover, how long does it usually take to give you some of that back?
Well, there's a lot of variables that go into that. You know, it depends at what stage you terminate it, what the carbon to nitrogen ratio is, how active the biology in your soil is, are you incorporating it, are you leaving it on top? So there's a lot of variables. That's one thing I want to talk about. If you're planting corn after a grass crop, it's something to be very careful of.
are you going to cover how we can accelerate that if a person wants to accelerate
Yes.
that? Okay. All right.
Yep.
Good, good.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how to capture more of that carbon from your cover crop and crop residues.
And just to better understand what you're seeing here, I had the question earlier, I should have said it earlier. Somebody asked, what did we put down last year? I want you to understand this didn't get any fertility, base fertility last year on a bean crop. So we do only fertilize on our corn years, and we do 2 ton. And on the beans, we don't, if you can't put enough potassium down, so we'll service that through either an infer or a foliar. But yeah, so we don't have other stuff that's still breaking down from last year. So I do want to point that out. It's a good question.
2 tons a litter.
2 tons a litter.
And you've got the analysis of what that
Yeah,
is.
actually I didn't think to print out the actual analysis.
Okay.
It is up there, but I didn't do the actual report. I didn't think about that, but I do have it if anybody'd like to see it. They tell you the analysis of the litter and then how much is available the first year. And so the information I got up there is pulled directly off of our, it'd be off our litter test.
I thought I saw it on one of the signs.
On the soil test it is.
Okay.
Yeah, So anyway.
Corn bean rotation?
Mostly corn bean rotation. Occasionally we'll throw in a small grain, but we're doing a lot of non-GMO. Everything you're going to see here, by the way, is non-GMO. And we do a lot of non-GMO soybean production. And then on the corn, all of this, the goal was to either hit a feed or a food grade market. We raise white corn as well on a couple other farms. But yeah, that's what we do primarily. So basically, we've taken our farm and made a big test plot out of it. So, anyway.
Maybe I want it there.
We'll try it. And then this can go over your back, and I'll just clip it right here. I wanted to thank 2 of our neighbors. I've got some other thank yous later, but one of them is Joe Bledsoe right behind us here, and Mark Borgman. They were the ones that give us a place to park and help things. Appreciate that, guys. And then Mark, he has a company called Midmo Beefalo. So when you guys registered, you actually put your name in the pot for a couple door prizes. We're giving away a couple freezer packs. And so we'll be doing that drawing, I think. Lindsay, are we doing that at lunch?
Yeah, between the panel and lunch.
Okay, great. So we'll do
A
that.
little announcement about that. Mark, so the door prizes, 2 of the door prizes are meat bundles. And it's Mid-Missouri Beefalo, and he wants me to show everybody that if you end up with the door prize, it does cook faster because it's leaner. So he said 20 to 30% faster.
Good to know. Good to know.
Everybody needs to know that for whoever gets those prices.
And were we able to get some flyers or pamphlets in case anybody wanted to try? His shop and freezers are literally right across the road here. It's kind of cool what they've been doing, and so yeah,
Sedalia Farmers
they're at
Market.
Sedalia's Farmer Market today. That's why he can't be here today. So, but anyway, just want to put a little plug in there. And guys, we all know it's good to have good neighbors, so we're blessed there. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Ken.
Okay, thanks, Derek.
Where are you from, your background? We'll start there.
I'm Ryan Davis from Southeast Iowa. I have grew up family farm. We have Davis seed and
No relation.
yeah. That's just a little bit about me. So
Hi, I'm Ryan Sims. Grew up third generation farmer in Sweet Springs, Missouri. And, lived there my entire life. And we have a feed business that we operate there off the farm too, along with cattle and row crop.
Hey, you're hung up there, buddy. There you go. Okay, nobody was hurt. Good deal. Troy, let's see.
My name's Troy Lowe. I'm from Chilhowie, Missouri. Kind of a small-time farmer with corn and soybeans and sometimes wheat.
You have a few cows.
You cattle.
Yes. So good deal. Good deal. All right, guys. So the first question I'm going to ask, I'll start back with you. What intrigued you to either try or kind of get out of the box and maybe take a look at biologicals?
Well, I was just looking for something different with fertilizer prices, and it seemed like my yields were staying the same, not really improving a whole lot from year to year. So, and I do think it's kind of the way of the future, trying to improve your soil. It's just what I wanted to try different.
So, I'm somewhat familiar with your farm. Been out there a couple times. Can you share maybe the products or product that you've tried, and just kind of some general observations or some results?
Yes, I used the Invilex, which is a powder form that we put on dry fertilizer, mixed it in the mixer, threw it on the ground. I did work it in, and we had quite a few test strips so we could try to tell the difference. There it come out, and we dug up a few plants. Some of the pictures are in some of those flyers that you all got. There was quite a bit of difference. I was impressed with it, and really looking forward to see what the yield difference is on it.
Yep. We took a drone up last week to see if we could see some differences in the field. That was interesting. It's kind of at that awkward stage where some stuff's starting to mature and others aren't, but if you could see it, and I got to tell you, around here we usually don't use these three words together, but double crop corn. This guy over here is pulling it off, and we can't take credit for the Invilex totally on that. There's just a strip, but yeah, they have double crop corn here in Missouri. That's a little unusual after wheat. So anyway, we'll be curious to see how that looks.
Yep.
So, all right, guys. Ryan, see, I guess you need a microphone. Which one? You can go. There you go. Either one of you. Okay. Yeah. So the question is what kind of got you thinking outside the box, or what intrigued you to try something different?
Well, especially over the last 5 years, I'm the guy that does planting and the harvesting. So I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the monitors, and I just noticed that everything we were doing, because we had been focusing on our residue levels, organic matter, and things of that nature. We were doing testing, grid sampling, the whole 9 yards, and nothing was improving, but it just felt like our yields were plateaued. And over the, I would say the last 5 years, especially, we were having trouble with, we had so much residue in the fields, and even Derek can contest this. He came out this year to do his first soil test for me, and he said, "I think I'm in the wrong field." And I said, "No, since you're saying that, I know you're in the right field." Anyway, but we had fields that had just for crop rotation purposes, we had done beans on beans, problem was we still had corn residue there 3 years prior. Yeah, all this was building up, and at the beginning when all this started, I thought it was a good thing because I thought we were building organic matter. You know, I thought I never had thought about what was below ground. All we were just worried about what was above ground. Anyway, so those were things that kind of started the process of thinking, and literally on the coldest day of the year this year, Derek happened to stop by. And,
Coldest day, literally. Alan and I back here like to, we earned this for sure.
But no, the so far experience this year, I've been impressed by all the little things that we just noticed that have come back. And it's just amazing all the little things that we've seen so far.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks. Before you start, I've got a question for Ken. He's talking about trying to get organic matter. What is the difference between residue and organic matter? What has to happen for that?
Well,
Are you on there? Go all the way over.
hello. Hey, residue matter, you've got your carbon in the plant, but it's also attached to all those nutrients that aren't available in that form. And it's not stable. But organic matter takes the work of microbes, and it takes, say, a corn crop that's maybe 100-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio, and it ends up at 10-to-1. That's what organic matter is. And it's very stable. It holds a lot of water in the soil. It has a lot of exchange site. It holds nutrients. So basically, it's the productive factor of your soil if you can build organic matter. So the key is turning that residue into organic matter.
So, thanks, Ken. All right, Ryan. I know you, obviously, in addition to the seed, you farm both conventional and organic, so you get to see a little bit of everything, and of course, working with your different growers. But yeah, I know you tried some new things this year, and let's go let you go from there. Derek got me started on red seed treatment and blue head, and I saw a lot of good things from that, and so I kind of came back to him asking what else I could do to get more yield out of my crop, and he started telling me about Excel and MVP and Enforce, and it's just been something that I've seen really good emergence right off the bat, and just a really good deep color all the way through without really coming back through and side dressing or anything, and it's I'd say it's really paid off so far. So guys, you're doing some starter fertilizers in furrow and foliar. I know it's kind of a challenge getting some of the foliars on there at the end of the season this year. Yeah. Not that you have anything else going on, but got some on that it wasn't able to get some of it, but it's things are looking pretty good. So we're gonna have a pretty good look at these products. Good. So they're unlike you might expect from some synthetics. Not all these products are kind of just try one, it's a magic bullet. It is kind of a system approach. However, there are certain things that will move the needle by themselves. If a grower is really wanting to try to get make a big change and just start with one thing, it's kind of like you mentioned the resin seed treatment. It's a mycorrhizae, so just like the myco seed treatment and the Endo 24, each one of them kind of have their own little strong suit, if you will. But at the end of the day, we got better roots, as we saw in the soil pit. You're going to have a better crop, right? Put a good foundation under your skyscraper. So that's what we're after. But so we've got some questions here. This one came from a cattleman here, and his question was, this may be more for you, Ken. He said, in a pasture situation like on the farm that I'm familiar with, he said, with so much grass left. So this gentleman's done a good job of managing. He's got a lot of good undergrowth, good lush green undergrowth. And he said, how important is it that the residues because he's looking to put an application on, that it hits the actual residue.
Well, I think it's, you know, in a case like that where you've got a green grass or other forages out there, if it hits that, you know, eventually it's going to be in the soil. And the neat thing about being on living tissue, it can stay alive without getting watered in for a while. Or if you put it on dry corn stalks, kind of a different environment.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. So this time of year where we got a lot of sap or moisture in the corn stalks, I don't really watch the weather much. I'll go ahead and apply it. But if we get into a dry spell, say a couple weeks of dry weather, the corn stalks are dry. If I don't have a heavy dew or something, I'll usually hold off and either do it right before a rain or something of that nature, because these organisms do actually live, they're soil-borne organisms. And so anyway, we kind of try to watch that and manage for it. Another question. When do we get the most bang for the buck on pasture with residues, fall or spring?
I'm not sure I can answer that. Either one is acceptable, but I think the key is if you can hit a good moisture window, it's going to work much better.
Okay.
If you could time it in front of rain, I don't care if it's spring or fall.
That's kind of like asking what's better, ice cream, chocolate or vanilla?
Yeah.
We could have an argument about that, I'm sure. So, yeah, good. Let me look at some more questions here. I got some written down from earlier. Oh, this is a good question. I'm glad it got asked because this is something we usually try to touch on. Does the spray applications work with chlorinated water or well water? How do you handle that? I'll take that one. So often I'll get growers and they'll say we've tried it, but it didn't work, or we wasn't sure it worked. And I think of a grower 2 or 3 years ago over by Higginsville, and he was actually given demo product, and the product is a great product. And he'd done 300 or 400 acres of it, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm pretty excited about seeing what happens." And I said, "Well, that's cool." I said, and he was talking about spraying it, and I said, "Wait a minute, where'd you get your water?" He said, "Well, we fill out the city water." Guys, what do you guys do with a pool if you want to lower bacteria content in your pool? Somebody answer that? Chlorine. So what are we doing when we've got live product and we're adding chlorinated water? We could go down this trail quite a ways, even with chemical and other things that we're doing. So the good news is it's a simple fix. If you don't have access to well water or dechlorinated water, for just literally pennies an acre, you can put a dechlorinator in. The ladies around here, we have a running joke. They hand out little bags. It looks like cocaine, to be honest. And we'll hand that out with the blue in as it's going out the door, or the other bios. Now, some bios are more sensitive than others. For blue in, absolutely not. You got to make sure you don't have chlorine in there. The dechlorinator, what it actually does is turn the chlorine into chloride, which is basically a plant food at that point. So, am I saying that correct, or does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
So, it's little tips and tricks like that. Probably nobody here has made more mistakes than this guy right here. But the cool part is we learn a lot. So that's what I tell people right here. Well, we learn a lot around here. So, but thank you for asking that question. That's an important one. So, let's see. Got another one here.
Sometimes when you're on the cutting edge, you bleed a little.
Or a lot. Or a lot. How important, here we go. How important is water quality? Well, guys, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to touch on that, but I'm also going to let Travis touch on that here in a minute, or here right after lunch. So water quality, it is way more important than we can give it credit for. I'm not going to go down this much because not only is he going to be giving you information on the green lightning, but he's going to go into the science a little bit why it works. And so I'm going to let him kind of answer that question. But water quality is very important. It's kind of interesting. Last year, I was really watching the pH on some things that we were mixing in the sprayer, and I didn't have a pH meter. And so I went to get one, and they didn't sell it at Parallel Ag. They didn't sell it at MFA. So then I went to some of the custom applicators in the area. and not one custom applicator had a pH meter. So wait a minute. It's important it is. Why don't they have that? Now I know somebody had one, but I couldn't find one. And so I literally dug out pool strips and tried to fake it till you make it, as they say. That being said, do those kinds of things. Those little details will pay huge dividends. And Travis, it's real interesting when he's going to share with you on pH and water. So, all right. So those questions.
Derek, along with that, the half-life of a lot of chemicals, farm herbicides, fungicides, in a 7 pH is a matter of minutes is the half-life, where if you drop it down to 5.5, it's hours. So it is hugely important.
Good point. Good point. Ryan, I'm Ryan Sims. I'm going to pick on you here a little bit. So if you guys open up your book, the one that has the color pictures, right? And you'll see the front page or the first page in there, framework. One of those pictures is from him. One of them is actually from a little mistake I made. Yes, make sure everybody's got a book there. But anyway, would you kind of give a little bit of the background on what happened there?
Yeah, so you'll see in this first picture here, the one that just kind of squiggly lines there in the grass. So anyway, earlier this year, I can't remember what the date was, but Derek came out and he applied first program you see over here on the board, framework, what else was it? Residues. Yep. And so anyway, but I stole about a quart or so.
I didn't know he did this.
Out of his deal, and I just wanted to put it somewhere to see if it worked or not, because that's just how I do it. Anyway, but that picture is actually taken from my yard where I walked around that evening. I just kind of sprayed it out there, just dumped it out there. No big deal. I wish now I would have written my name, but no, that picture was probably taken I don't know a month or so ago when it was 100 degrees. And anyway, so that is just in the corner of my yard with no fertilizer, no nothing. And obviously you can see the grass went dormant and whatever. And then one evening, my wife asked me, she's like, why are those lines out there in the yard? And anyway, I didn't pay any attention. I went out there and I said, well, that's where I poured the framework. And anyway, I have a little silly thing that I do whenever I'm planting this stuff. Something my dad used to do. But when I'm trying to figure out what the soil health is like planting-wise as far as down pressure or whatever, I want to simply take a screwdriver and I'll just drop it on the ground, see what it does, see how hard it penetrates or sticks. Well, that night, I got my screwdriver. I went out there. So where the grass is brown, obviously, it hadn't rained in a while. And anyway, the screwdriver just hit the ground and fell over. Where the grass is green, stuff. Anyway, so we saw the same results in our cornfields as well when you're out there. The soil health totally changed. And so we saw earthworms coming back this year. And then we have a separate field that's right next to this one field that I'm talking about. Separates it just by a fence row. Farm planted same way, same field. But where the framework was applied, the soil tilth is different. There's earthworms there, and it just feels, when you walk on the ground, it feels different. But you cross the fence line, and the ground is hard, and anyway, it has cracks. Anyway, it's totally different. And then the same way here in the yard now. Since then, since it's rained, obviously you can't tell, this went away, but when it did get hot and dry, we saw the same results in the cornfields as well. Those fields that were treated with framework in that first program, they handled the heat stress very well. I mean, they weren't stressed. And it was amazing to see that. And now, when you drive down the road, those fields where the framework is applied, same corn varieties and everything, except that corn is drying down correctly, whereas the other one is basically dying down. And anyway, it's amazing to see that. And those are just some little things that I saw. But I was really amazed by what it did here just in my yard, just by we've had trouble there in my house or the pasture as far as how that pasture performs anyway. We've done some tests with different fertilizer programs there as well. But I was really impressed with what the initial program did this year.
By the way, I'm hearing a lot of this for the first time, so I think think I'm excited all again. Where do I sign up? Thanks, Ryan. I promised Troy I wouldn't make him talk much. Unless you just want the mic, and I'll hand it over. But one thing I wanted to bring up about what he talked about with the Invilex is, and I got another question here, kind of led me into that. That white sheet that has all those different microorganisms in there, that is not all of them that we work with, but that's the biggest chunk of them. And it's really important, at least what I've found, is that the ratio, so everything will have a CFU count on the label. Look at the back of that label, that product you're looking at. I know there's other products out there that we haven't tried that work as good, maybe even better. But I really watch those ratios. And so with that being said, the Invilex, I want to touch on that just so people understand that a little better. So Invilex is a brand new product. He's actually the first trial in the U.S. this year to do that. There's one here, one in Iowa. We're fortunate because we work really closely with manufacturers that we get to trial some of that. Thank you, Han Fertilizer, for allowing us to meet Troy and do this. That was a good deal. But that being said, the results have been really, really great. We expected to see good results, but I'm going to tell you kind of a little trick here, okay? There's a lot of similar biology that's in that Invilex that goes on dry fertilizer programs. So if you're out there putting a dry fertilizer program, you're going to get your biology with this as what's in residues. If you get to looking at the labels, so this is a little tip tricky, and you'll notice, now the ratios are different because of the formulations, and there's reasons behind that. But my point is this, is the reason that, and we didn't talk about it, but we pulled sap test off of his field when we went out and looked at it when it was, about chest high-ish. We dug up plants in two different places. So the picture you see there, we actually duplicated. The first time we pulled up a refuge corn plant, had the purple seed under it, right? So we want to make sure we didn't skew the results. So we went and dug another one, same root ball. But now you have a way, without adding another pass to your fertilizer or your farming program, to get this biology out there with that fertilizer and make it more available, plus whatever else is in that soil, you will help make it more available. Quick show of hands. Does anybody know roughly how many pounds of phosphorus are in the top 6 inches of an average acre of soil? Somebody throw a number out.
6,000.
6,000. Multiple tons. Well, you're both right. He's heard me say it though. He's cheating over here. There's roughly 6,000 pounds of phosphorus out there. It's just not available. What? So if we can find specific organisms, which we are, they're here, that's how this is working. It's got the science behind it like everything else. It's just, you can't look this stuff up on the internet. I'm not a conspiracy theory, guys. I'm not going down that road, but consider where, your information comes from. And so back to your Invilex, we pulled sap test, and his phosphorus and his potassium were up quite a bit. His phosphorus is up 11, 12%. Okay? So that's not a guess. I mean, that's what it showed. And how did that happen? That was the only difference, was that biology. So I don't know. Matter of fact, we were at your place last week about dark, and I said, oh my gosh, this is better than I thought. So we turned around and come back again the next morning. You didn't have breakfast ready, though, did you?
No.
No. So, okay. Yeah.
So whenever you start, like I put it on my fertilizer, what if I was wanting to put it in furrow and then maybe go over the top with something too? Is there ever a downfall when you start stacking these different biologics?
That's a good question. I'm going to let Ken handle that one.
No, actually, we see it often.
Yours is delayed. It'll come on. Give it a second.
How about now? Okay. Actually, we see often they're complementary, that to use the seed treatment on top of an in-furrow or on top of residues, that we'd encourage you, set a budget for the year, how much biology, but the more times you can apply it, more different ways, probably the better. But the two best ways, I think, are anything you can do on the seed or close proximity, such as an in-furrow or a 2x2 because you can impact the roots without treating a large area. But then also anything you do to speed up residue decomposition pays big dividends too.
A lot of time you'll hear me refer to the 1-2-3 punch, which is kind of what we do with Ryan. You know, like I said, I pulled out our pulse soil test. You're starting to see a theme there. Test. It doesn't cost much to do it, guys. That Heaney over there cost $65 to do it. If I would have put all the fertilizer down they called for, they would have been $7,200 on this farm, and I spent $65 to figure out that I didn't need everything they said. Okay, let's just be intentional. But back to Ryan, we were intentional about how we used the framework because of the biology that's in it. We also did it with the residues, and then we put a food source with it, Excel. And that's how we got off to the races. Now, since then, he's done a foliar program to help make sure things are going. We've done, I think, a couple SAP tests now on that and the field down the road. Fun little fact, if you look in that book, you'll see one called Tale of Two Fertilizer Programs. The one named Giffen, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, 40 pounds of dry fertilizer pre-plant,
Yeah, that's right.
okay? And then the other farm had a 40, 80, 80, 15 threes. That sound right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I want you guys really look at the difference between the two SAP test results on PK levels and the other levels for that matter. I'm not saying that fertilizer doesn't work. I'm saying we got to do something to help make it available. And that's why I'm extremely excited about the Involex. Yeah, I feel like we've had Roundup Ready beans come out all over again, right? So a way to cheat. So Ryan, I'm gonna pick on you, Ryan Davis. And I'm kind of taking a risk here because we've talked several times, and I just remember some of the observations that you made from last season in a drought. And then specifically, it would have been probably about Resid HC. Some observations, maybe you or a neighbor. Does that ring a bell? Maybe what you shared with me. I think about observations in the field, and then the other day he calls me, and he is in the bean field, and you mentioned pod size and count on soybeans, just some general observations. Do you mind kind of giving that, and kind of give an idea too the kind of weather you've been up there in Iowa?
Yeah, so this year, past several years, we've been just extremely dry year after year and barely getting a crop up. But this year, we've kind of had some decent rains, and I was out on our beans the other day, and I mean they're up chest high and loaded with pods, and seeing 4 pods, and I think a lot of it's got to do with the starter program on the 4-year program I'm on, so it's just getting that food source to the plant and let it do its thing and really show off what it can do. And it's just been nice to see from the past few years where I haven't been using anything. I've just been using just untreated beans on the organic side, and then this year I'm running the Resid and starter Foyer. And Resid is been something. There's a big change, and just from even my some of my non-organic crop across the road that doesn't have it. You can see a big change in root mass too. So thank you, buddy. Thank you.
So I had a question earlier. Said, how do growers justify the cost of some of these products, right? That's a great question. And in a soil health or just a yield approach. So one of the first things I'll probably point out, you guys can see the Resid HC pictures. You'll see it in both last year where it was a drought situation and then this year where it was excess water. And you're seeing similar results. The point that I want to bring up to that's a $7 an acre investment. I don't know if we put yield information in there from last year. We'll do it again this year and have yield information. But last year, a 29 bushel difference on corn and it's either 10 or 14 on beans. I don't remember now. But, and we just had 2 trials out on that, on each crop. But my point is this, it doesn't cost a lot to do that. Now, some of these could break the bank if you wanted to, and I'm guilty of that. When I first started, I tried everything. Now that we're working with more growers on more soil types, more situations, we're realizing that there's certain places that we should start. One of the simplest is a seed treatment. It does need to be run through a treater, for example. So if you don't have access to that, you know, most of the seed companies so by the way, we wholesale directly to seed companies. So if you've got a seed dealer that you're working with, I know Ryan, him and his family are doing some of that, but we'll be glad to help you get that on there. It's one of the some of the lowest hanging fruit. So I think I was asked last year. I don't know this year that I'm going to answer it the same way, and I may. But last year said if you could do one thing, what would it be? Last year the Resit HC moved the needle as much or more than anything else, and we're just putting a good foundation under our house. That's all we're doing. So we've done that with Michael Street Treat forever. The endo's new to me, but there's ways to do that. So. And then, yeah, just yield. So soil health and yield. Like I said, it's changed. Our soil has changed. I've got a farm over here on H Highway that I've been farming since I was 13. You know, it was my freshman year of high school, and I've been the only operator on it since. And to be honest, I've had some of the worst crops ever. If you ever want to see some of my screw-ups, drive by that farm. We knew we had to do something different, and I did the same program Ryan did. And if you guys know where it's at, drive by and take a look at it. That is white corn over there. It is low input as well. It's actually a little lower than this one. So it's probably going to be right around 30 units of nitrogen. I took video from the sprayer when I foliar applied it just because I wanted to see for myself too and have a reference to that. The whole 130, 40 acres over there is consistently, it's consistent. It doesn't vary anything even like this. But I had that framework. And so that second picture you see there, the Saturday before Easter, it was going to be cold that night. I didn't get it all done before Easter, so I drained out the booms. There is no fertilizer in that picture. I want to point that out. That is just biology and humic acid, or humate, 12% product. And 36 hours, you'll see the blue mark around it. The outside of that marker, obviously you can see it's a lot lighter, darker, shorter. That happened in 36 hours, from 6:30 Saturday night to 7 o'clock Monday morning. You go out there in that field, the tractor pulled different when we went out to level it and till it. It's an amazing looking crop, and all we did was wake up what was already there. Don't know if that'll happen every year, but we are seeing consistency more than we've ever seen it. So, yeah, there's a good question in the back, maybe.
Well, I don't know how good it is.
Yeah.
I have learned that 1/3 of the greenhouse gases comes from agriculture, and that gives agriculture a bad rap. But what's really going on is the chemical applications and the production of chemical fertilizers. That's the big bulk of that 1/3, and that organic farming and regenerative farming reduces that impact because you eliminate the chemicals that you get indicated, and that improves the quality of the soil, and it's more resistant to drought because of the tilth in the soil. And so I'm just wondering how much is Ray connecting the dots here to encourage farmers or help farmers to convert over to a micrological approach to farming.
Thank you. Is it Paul? Is that what I remember?
Paul.
Yeah, Paul. Thank you, Paul. So I hope most of you heard his question. I want to tag team with you a little bit on this, Ken. So obviously we do things a little different around here. But at the end of the day, we've got a farm payment to make, just like everybody else does, and we got to stay profitable. And so there's got to be a happy medium. We made the decision last fall to go all non-GMO, so we run a herbicide program just like everybody else does. But I needed to be able to do that because I needed to be able to be free to visit a lot of your farms. And I've been on a lot of your farms, and that's what we do. I've never been fortunate enough to be an order taker. and I don't mean that disrespectful. It just means that that's how I've done it. I've always just called and put an order in, said, give me an X amount program. And we believe that we need to know your dirt, and so that we can make some good decisions. Because at the end of the day, my family's a product of the 80s, and I don't want to go there again. And I'm more excited than I've ever been. We were going to bed last night. She said, well, what do you think? Think we're ready? And I said, man, I just hope a few people just catch on to what we're doing. Because I have no doubt we're going to be able, and I'll go to your question here in a second a little more, Paul, but I have no doubt we can keep more growers in the black this year and not sacrifice yield, and just simply just do a better job of what you've got. And it can be scaled up. That's the cool part. Back to the biological environmental impact. Yes. I believe, I'll just be honest, I'm not afraid to use chemical. I actually did some of my own herbicide application.
Thanks, Derek. So Derek is titled as Field Day Farm Different. I just want to talk about that. So what does that mean? It means that we need a new paradigm. We have to think different if we're going to farm different. And I'm sure a lot of you are already starting to think different. The reality of $3.50 corn is different than $6 to $7 corn. So we have to think different. How can we be efficient? How can we survive economically till we see better prices again? So in this paradigm, thinking differently, we wanted to encourage you to switch from a chemical approach to more of a biological approach. It's more than NP and K. We need to think in terms, how can I grow the most microbes per acre? The founder of AgriEnergy, Dave Larson, said the most fertile soil is the one with the greatest quantity and variety of microbes. And so when we can increase our microbial diversity and the quantity out there, we get a lot of fertility naturally. I want you to feel free to ask questions as we go, but not a lot because we are on a tight schedule. And if you don't get a chance to ask a question during the presentation, I'll be here all during the field day. So as we make a transition from chemical to biological, we need a systems approach. There are no silver bullets. There's no one product that, hey, put this on and it's nirvana. It's going to take you there. But we do want to increase our biology. So part of that is creating a soil environment. It's managing air and water. It's trying to use less toxic substances that take our biology backwards. And then using inoculants, putting out products that actually have microbes and a diversity of microbes, and then making sure we feed those microbes so they can do the work that they're designed to do. Why farm biologically? What are the long-term benefits? This is what we've seen. Again, AgriEnergy's been pushing this soil health, biological diversity, renewable farming. It's had a lot of names over the years, but we've been working with it since the early 80s. And this is what we see over time as our soils become more biologically alive. Improved soil structure, so that's better soil tilth that we talked about, that coffee grounds crumb structure, and then better aggregation. That's the clumping together of particles below ground or below the surface that gives us that pore space that allows air and water management and roots to penetrate. Enhanced root growth. Some of the biological compounds encourage root growth, and then we have a soil that's more favorable for root growth. Higher water holding capacity and infiltration rates. So the infiltration rate comes from improved soil tilth, and the holding capacity comes as we increase the organic matter or carbon. Carbon can hold a lot of water. Increased nutrient cycling, and that's coming from last year's crop residue or cover crops but also just the minerals that are already in your soil, but not in available form. They need microbes to put them in available form. Faster residue decomposition, build soil organic matter, and as we do that, we can reduce our nitrogen applications and also our phosphorus applications. And when these things all come together, you should see your yields increase, and you should have drier corn at harvest. You know, in an ideal world, at harvest, you have a green plant with a brown shuck on it. And if we can keep our plant healthier, it's going to dry down rather than die down. That moisture can move out through the plant instead of all having to go out through the ear. So more biology. How do we get that? We can inoculate. By inoculate, we're talking about putting microbes out there that are beneficial, that serve some purpose of building soil health or helping crops grow better. So we can inoculate our soils by using soil applied biologicals. We can use seed treatments. We can inoculate plants either with foliar sprays or things like that, or endophytes. That's kind of a newer thing. Microbes that actually live within the plant, and a lot of the nitrogen fixing products that are on the markets are endophytes. They live within the plant. And then we can inoculate our residues to speed up decomposition and get those nutrients back out of them quicker. You know, Derek said we're not asking you to reinvent your farm, but all of you probably can do one or more of these practices pretty simply with things that you're already doing. So more biology. Part of it is feeding the microbes that we add, but also the ones that are beneficial that are already in your soils. So part of that increasing the biology comes from good management of crop residues, cover crops. You know, one of the best things that cover crops do, in our view, is having a living root in the soil more months or weeks of the year. The real benefit of plants is they put out root exudates, and that's what feeds the microbes, living off of those sugars and things that plant roots put out. So really your farm is a solar factory gathering energy from the sun, converting it to sugar to go into the plant, but then also part of that leaks out the roots and feeds the microbes. That's how we build organic matter, is really through root exudates and microbial activity. We can add carbon into our fertility programs, things like manure or compost, liquids such as fish hydrolysate, sugar, molasses, humic and fulvic acids. Carbon sources that help the plant and feed microbes. So this graph was put together by Dr. Robert Krimmer, the University of Missouri, talking about functional groups of microbes. And we're not going to go over all this, but that's why we talk about the importance of microbial diversity. Each microbe has a certain purpose and function that it does. Some of them help plant growth, some suppress disease, some help with plant nutrient availability, weed and insect suppression, soil organic matter, soil structure, biodegradation of harmful substances, and then some help the plant to cope better with environmental and climate stresses. And if you think about it, we want a whole diverse group to show up at our table. It's kind of like a church potluck. You know, when everyone brings their favorite dish, eating experience is pretty enjoyable. Well, the same thing happens in our soil if we bring a diverse package of microbes, all doing something beneficial to help the soil and the plant. It's a pretty enjoyable experience. So, managing next year's crop starts now or at harvest time. So the numbers up there, I don't know if you can see them, 100, 33, and 242. That represents how many pounds of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are in a 220 bushel corn crop. And that's just in the above ground residue. So 100 pounds of nitrogen, 33 of phosphate, 242 pounds of potassium. And a lot of soils are short in potassium. Or you put fertilizer on, like Derek said, and the soil test doesn't go up. Well, what can we do to capture that? Well, we want to speed up that decomposition and get those nutrients baked into the organic matter. So what is good residue management? In our view, it's creating more surface area of residue to put in contact with the soil. And that can be things like chopping corn heads, going back over the field with the shredder, vertical till machines, things like an airway or a gin till, just anything that creates more surface of area of residue, and we want it in contact with the soil. For the most part, the microbes that decompose residue live in the soil. They're not going to climb up a dry corn stalk and munch away on it. But if we get it in contact with the soil, we have a chance to decompose it. Keep residue in the aerobic zone. You know, we identified the aerobic zone out there by where it changed the soil till. You can also tell by looking at plant roots. But what happens if we bury it in the anaerobic soil? It doesn't decompose properly. It can pickle and ferment and actually give off formaldehydes and products that are toxic to next year's roots. And then we can inoculate. We can put more organisms out there that do break down crop residue and put a food source with them. And cover crops can help speed up that decomposition process. Again, if we have a living root in the soil, it's putting out plant root exudates and feeding those microbes. So we see if guys put a product on to speed up residue decomposition, if they have a cover crop growing at the same time, those microbes are more active and you actually speed up decomposition. So the product that we've been using is the Residus WS. It's a water-soluble powder. You use 1/10 of a pound per acre. Guys spray it on. Coverage isn't that important, but more water is always better, I think, when you're dealing with biology. We don't need great coverage. In fact, large droplets are probably better than small. And there's a few people that will stream it on just to keep it more concentrated. But then we do recommend putting a food source with it, sugar, amino acids, or carbons like a humate or humic acid, things like that to support those microbes we're putting out there.
Ken?
Yeah.
I just want to add a couple of things to that. So ultimately, I think you're kind of starting to see a theme here is how can we recycle the nutrients that are there? And so not only on crop fields are we doing this, but we're doing it on hay fields. And there's a picture with similar biology in your book on some grass, a couple different pictures. That's what we're doing. I want to point out when you saw that greener grass, there was 0 fertilizer added. So that was one thing. The other thing is, we can't drive this home enough, is most of these products will have some food source with them, but adding it to it, it's like taking it from a 6-cylinder to a good old 454 4-barrel. It will really open it up and we'll really start making those microbes, making them happen.
So yeah, in your hay and pasture field, sometimes you'll see a thatch layer on the surface, and that really inhibits that crop growth and performance. But something like a good residue program can help break that thatch down, cycle those nutrients, and get things moving again. This is actually a farm in northwest Indiana several years ago. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's soybeans in there. They were no-tilled into corn stalks. Well, the previous fall, he runs an airway, it was just a rolling tine aerator, very little soil disturbance. He put the residues on, but he had 4 point rows there that he left. Didn't run the airway or didn't put the residues on. He didn't want to make a whole round just to pick up half a swath. So the next summer, this is what the bean crop looked like. This was treated, this wasn't. Well, I don't know how well you can see, but there's corn stalks here, where here they're pretty well gone. And the other neat thing that's a great illustration of what happens with residue decomposition, where there's more corn stalks, that soil is cloddy. And where they're decomposed, it's nice, mellow soil. Why is that? Well, you think about a 200 bushel corn crop, it takes an army of microbes to break those corn stalks down and turn it into organic matter. And one of the byproducts is those organisms secrete polysaccharides that take individual soil particles and glue them together and form those water-stable soil aggregates. And that's what gives us that coffee grounds soil tilt. And we can't promise that residues will always get these results, but I can promise you every time you speed up decomposition and have rapid decomposition, you will improve soil tilt. That's a given every time. So this is in Bureau County. This had the airway and residue supplied, and there it is 30 days later. You start to see white fungal growth on the corn stalks decomposing. So that's in 30 days time in late fall. And again, the pictures don't show up that well, but these corn stalks are covered in white rot fungi. These stringy things are actinomycetes. Here's a little white puffball. That's going to turn into one of those red mushrooms. The first time I ever saw that was on Francis Child's farm. Maybe you young guys don't know who that is, but he held the world record for corn yield for several years. But that's just one of the things that sometimes goes along as residue decomposes. Yeah, this picture just shows kind of more of the same. You got the actinomycetes, you got white rot fungi, you got an earthworm in there, and good soil aggregation. So all these things are working together to improve the soil. This was a no-till situation. A guy put residues on and then no-till beans in it, and he said he didn't really see any difference in the stalk, didn't think it did anything. And then as they were going over yield monitor records, he noticed all of a sudden there was an 8 bushel boom. And he went back and looked through the records. Well, that 8 bushel higher yield came where I put the residues on. So then they went back out to the field, and what they found was in the untreated stalks, the pith was still in there, and where they put the residues on, most of the pith was eaten out. So those nutrients were recycled, but yet if you just look at the percent of residue coverage, it wasn't much different. So again, we've touched on this. One way to grow more microbes is to use cover crops. Take advantage of the root exudates that they put out. Some cover crop guide drawings. Mistakes that I see people make. Avoid grass cover crops ahead of grass, of a grass cash crop. Use legumes if possible. Now that can be hard to do, to get a legume established in a corn soybean rotation, but and some people like to plant rye ahead of corn, and it can be done successfully, but it can also be a real challenge. We saw that last year in a dry spring, guys that planted corn into rye. There's three things working against you. The rye pulled out more moisture and the corn was already struggling in dry soil. The rye has used some nitrogen, so we don't have as much nitrogen there for the corn crop. And then third, rye is allelopathic. That means it puts out compounds through the roots that inhibit other plant roots, and especially roots of grass crops like corn. And if you don't have rain to flush those allelopathic compounds out, that corn oftentimes just sits there. We saw that in the drought of 2012, that rye after corn just was miserable. So we need to maximize.
Some of you guys may not even have any idea what he does. I'm here to tell you that it's probably, well, it is. It's one of the most exciting things happening right now in ag. It takes a while to get understood, and when they do, it just clicks. There's several of you here in this room that have machines this year. Some of you just got them, right? But it's amazing what it'll do. I want to point out that last poster. When you look at that last poster, make the time to look at it, take a picture, whatever. But sap tests don't lie. And that is a 0 nitrogen. We didn't put manure. Actually, the guy that put the manure here, I figured people wouldn't believe me, so he can attest that he blocked out that area and did not apply manure this year. It also didn't get P&K, by the way. But anyhow, when you look at those sap test levels, where it had the regular program and where it had the green lining and just the blue in only, amazing. So take a look at that. He's getting ready to tell you why it works. So Travis, thank you for introducing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So most of you guys are going to fall asleep on me, so I'm going to tell you a couple stories because it's more fun when it's like 90 degrees and sweaty outside. So a little background about me. I'll go a little further back since we're in Missouri. So my great grandpa was in Missouri, and this is my grandma telling me the story around the 40s, and so people said, "Hey, you're finally making some money in farming. You're doing pretty good. Are you ever going to move?" And he said, "Pigs fly. I will move from this state. I love this state. I'm going to be here till the day I die." The Lord has a sense of humor. A couple of weeks later, my grandma said from their tornado deal, they saw all their sows flying. There was a tornado came through, lifted all those suckers up, and he's like, "Well, it looks like we're moving to Iowa." So my grandpa, my grandma ended up eating in Perry, Iowa. My grandpa at the time was farming there. Back then, they were happy to get 50 bushel corn. Now that's a few years back. So first of all, from an innovation perspective, thank you guys for being here. You guys are on the cutting edge of the next generation of figuring out how to do stuff. We had a guy we talked to. He has one of our machines. He had over 600 bushel of corn. You're just like, how's it even possible? So part of that is on that 50 bushel back when my grandpa had it on 80 acres, he actually made a living. 80 acres now doesn't do the same thing. So a little bit more about me. So my family moved to California. We lived on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, not palm trees, but desert and mountains. 10 inches of rain a year. 4,000 acres in a single wide mobile home. Like there was no like, oh, you got to take over the farm. Wouldn't that be amazing? Like, I got to work twice as hard to keep it. And so part of why we're here is profitability. Like, so that was my deal. I remember we raised sheep and cattle, and we had hay and all kinds of stuff. But I remember one day, it was in February. First of all, I probably shouldn't have been lambing in January or February anyways, but we were lambing in February, stayed up all night, got this lamb to finally live. And I'm like, okay, I got a group of these things. I'm bottle feeding them every day. A few months later, we go to the sale, and I get $8 for that lamb. And I'm like, I worked so hard. Now, this is a few years back when we all made less money per hour. People have no idea how hard we worked back then for a little bit, but still. But if it didn't cost more than $10, we had to give them all of our money at that sales yard. And I thought, how are we ever going to make money? And we go to the store afterwards with our check, and I look at the lamb chops back then in the early 90s, and they were $12 a pound. I'm like, there's got to be a way to make more money. Like, somebody's making a bunch of money, but it's not the farmer. So fast forward, I had this old cowboy and said, a lot of guys go to universities, but if you really want to make money, you need to go learn as much as you can from as many farms as you possibly can. And I said, how do you do that being a cowboy? He's like, go learn how to shear sheep. And I'm like, all right, I think I could do that. So I started shearing sheep, and I went from farm to farm to farm. 13 different states, and I got to learn a few things. So in that whole thing, by the time I was done, we decided, I'm gonna sell the end product. Some of you guys do that. So we started the first organic beef ranch in California. Went back there, did that, sold to a bunch of hippies and a little bit of everybody in places that I'd never even been to before are now buying stuff, and they're you got 50 to 70 people lining up for it. You're like, this is amazing. So fast forward, we went from the organic beef side into the organic dairy side. We had a meat and cheese plant in Wisconsin and a creamery in California, and then expanded into desserts. 08 hit, and all of a sudden people quit buying organic stuff, and because they were all broken. But we're still the dessert side. Fast forward, we had a guy come up to us and said, "Hey, you should probably help us figure out how to do an organic burger chain. We think that people would go for that." And I'm like, "Oh, I can do that. I know where to get organic beef and cheese and all that good stuff. It could be fun." So I figured out, well, if they don't, if they have an organic burger chain, we figured out all of it, but they don't have an organic drink, nobody's really going to shop there. So you got to be on brand with what you're doing. So that was part of our original, figured out. Well, I started a beverage company. It went well, but now we're in 14 countries, and we sold. If you're to Chipotle, you'll see the drinks there. It's called Tractor. And the idea was for us to make money for the farm, for the farmer that's doing the organic stuff to be able to sell it for a premium, all the way through the chain. Looked like a good idea. But we had when Chipotle told us their numbers, we're going to need something like $40 million worth of organic stuff. All of a sudden, it's is there enough? You never think about that, but is there enough of those certain ingredients? So at that time, I was trying to figure out how do we make more. And looking back, the number one thing, the biggest thing in organics or farming in general is nitrogen. And the conventional farmers could put it on. You're always like, oh, how their stuff is so much bigger than ours. And you saw some guys that did a pretty good job at it, but it was still kind of growing up in that innovation curve. And so at that time, I was making some nitrogen drinks. I don't know if you guys ever had a nitrogen coffee, but it's a thing. And it makes it creamy, like you had milk in it. But anyways, I was thinking to myself, how is it I can take nitrogen and I could put it in a drink and I can still make it organic, but I can't take that same nitrogen and put it on the field? What's the deal? And at that point, they said, I asked our agronomist, and she said, different kind of nitrogen. And I was like, oh, I should probably know this. Why don't I know this? We use frozen nitrogen to make meat frozen while we were hauling stuff. We use every part of nitrogen. So we started digging in, and I said, well, I'm using nitrogen from the air to make these drinks. Is there a way? And she's like, I met a guy. His name is Joe. We call Nitro Joe. That's kind of the end. So as soon as I met him, at the time, he's like, I don't know what to call it, but I make a machine. And this machine takes nitrogen from the air, mixes it with water and a little bit of electricity, tastes like water, looks like water, smells like water. You can drink it, but it makes crops grow like crazy. It's nitrogen water. And I'm like, really? Are you sure? It sounds too good to be true.
Show me, right?
Yeah, show me. So I'm one of those weird, I have 11 kids, 9 grandkids. I'm like, if I could do it myself, I will. At some point, you stop doing that as you realize that people are better at it than you are after you break stuff. But I have an underground greenhouse at our farm in North Idaho. We've now moved to Lexington, Kentucky, by the way. But in our farm up there, we have sheep feedlot, cattle feedlot. We're growing citrus underground in North Idaho, where we can't hardly. We have like a 4-day growing season. As soon as it's ready to start getting growing something, it's dry, and then if you don't have water, you don't have a crop. So through that whole thing, it was about this time of year. It was about the 1st of August, and I met Joe, and I said, if this stuff works, send it to me. And he sends me a couple of gallons of it, and I get it in there. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try it. What am I gonna put it on? And I go to Ace Hardware store, and there's a bunch of free to good home tomatoes. I'm like, oh, perfect. These things are so ugly and pitiful. I got to try them because I know with nitrogen, if that tomato doesn't have any nitrogen, it's not going to grow. And these things look bad. So I get these 100 or so tomatoes, and I put them in about like this, like that side. I put his stuff on it. This side I don't in the greenhouse, and then I kind of step back for a week. All these die. The aphids ate them. They all fell over. Those ones are got about 8 inches taller. Some of them are a foot. I'm like, that stuff does work. And maybe, then I'm thinking to myself, maybe I put something else in that soil a little different because we do all kinds of tests. And I'm like, let's try it again. So I sprayed it again, and come October, it's 6 foot tall. It's blocking out the sun from even coming in these greenhouses. And we had 9.5 bricks of tomatoes hanging from those things. We never even had a ripe tomato in North Idaho. let alone having one that was that beautiful and wonderful. The stuff at the store had 3 bricks of tomatoes. Let's work. First of November, we still had a big crop. We had a big wind come, blew the top of our greenhouse off, like, you know, it's a farmer thing, and everything froze. It's all dead. We fix it. Wait till March. It starts warming back up, and I'm like, I'm gonna try some more of that stuff. It had frozen. I took some out and cooked it. I'm like, I'm gonna see what if I put this stuff with it, what might happen. So I was still kind of going back and forth. I called Joe, and I'm like, what's my application rate for this stuff? He's like, I don't know. You're the farmer. He's like, he used to drive a submarine. Anybody that's been under the ground for 5 years is a little bit different. They're kind of efficiency experts, to say the least. A nuclear sub at that. And so he's not a farmer. He's taking it to the USDA, citrus all kinds of stuff. He's like, I don't know. And I'm like, do I use a gallon per acre, like a extract kind of thing, or is it like a gallon per plant? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay. So I spray it again in March. Same thing, but this time I'm going to swap it. I'm like, I'm just in case that dirt was bad. So I get these beautiful tomatoes. I put them in on this side, and I put them in that side. I spray these ones, and they just blow up. Those ones, after a month, even though they were beautiful, died off. And I'm like, there is something to this stuff. And so after we did it, we did that with the strawberries. We put on pasture. Anything that we could. We put on some flowers. The roses went nuts, and the other ones I killed them a little bit. But I was like, oh, it actually works. So as I go through this whole process, I'm like, you know, an organic guy that gets an opportunity to use this stuff, it's electricity and water. Why wouldn't it work? That could be huge, and for our drip business, it would be amazing because we could have more supply for everybody and keep growing it. And so I called up Joe and like, we got to figure this out, how to work together. I said, so how much do you make a day of that stuff? And he's like, oh, it took me 2 days to make those 2 gallons. How what you're doing? I'm like, oh, can you make a bigger machine? He's like, nope, that's the only size it makes. I'm like, so what do you think we should be using it for? And he's like, I don't know. I had some cannabis guys came over and said that they could use it, and I'm like, that's the last thing we need is grow more weed. Let's grow more food. And so that was one of those like, you know, you can feed the world if we just get this right. Let's figure it out. So I thought, you know, huge air hose, you know, huge water hose, massive electricity, like a farmer. Like if you just want to make it bigger, you just make it way bigger. And he's like, nah, it doesn't work like that. Air is only a certain size. It only works in a certain, you know, it was beyond me. It was like, and so as we go down that process, I'm like, let's figure it out. So fast forward, that was about 4 years ago. Today, we have a machine that makes about 280 gallons an hour. We have one out here that does about 100 gallons a day. We have tested it in 30 states now, and now we're going in like 5th or 6th country. And we went from a little tiny facility in Florida where he was doing it, and I was in Idaho, to, man, I think we could feed the world with this thing. So I sold all my stock in my company, and we're selling a farm, and we moved to Lexington, Kentucky, because it's a lot closer to the Corn Belt, and we can get to people a lot quicker, and it's a good place to manufacture, and that's where we're at now. We went from a 4,000 square foot facility to a 65,000 square foot facility. Now we're like, we need 20 acres with a bunch of facilities on it now, because this is going to be huge. So some nuts and bolts. What is it? This machine takes what we breathe. 78% of what we breathe, about 78%, depending on elevation, is nitrogen. Everything is oxygen. It's nitrogen. It's N2. So N2, when a storm comes over, a lightning storm comes over, it breaks it into N. And then ozone connects to it. So you got NO3, nitrate. Nitrate's what the plant likes. When the water hits the ground, a couple days after a storm, it's always green. After a lightning storm, it always is. And that is called green lighting. So we thought it was kind of cool. We trademarked the name, and that's what our company name is. It's called Green Lighting. So in that, what does it do? Well, it makes an equivalent of about 3 pounds of N for 1 gallon of product, which is kind of like a 32. So if you're used to going that route. But what it doesn't do is you don't have to haul it from somewhere. You don't have to extract it from petroleum. You don't have to mix it with salt. You don't have to do a bunch of stuff to it. It's water and air. That's it. And a little bit of minerals that's in the water. Too much minerals causes problems. We'll talk about that in a second. So right now we've got it on corn, we've got it on wheat, we did it on potatoes. Last year on potatoes, we got 5,500 pounds extra potatoes with electricity and water than we did with 28. And so it's 28.5 tons of potatoes per acre. When we put just water on it, we got 12. So it's not just water. It's doing something else, for sure. Guarantee you, no doubt about it. We also didn't have any fungus problems. And that was like, okay, that's the next thing. But how do we get rid of the bugs and the fungus? Well, if we get the bricks up, which we do, Yesterday I had a guy text me, he's like, this is amazing. My conventional stuff has 5 bricks, yours has 9 so far. I've only put in 2 applications down. So we're like, okay, get that bricks over 11, we got less bugs. So that's kind of like where we were going. Kind of on the bigger level with what this is, as we try it and we see how it works, at very least, your cost goes down. At very least. So if you're just making the same yield, we had guys that did wheat yesterday, and we got wheat results yesterday from Canada. They had 98 bushel for red wheat. That's 80s their average. But he said, if I had that with just my 28 and I put how much I needed for that, the difference in that with the profitability, it's like $160, something like that. He's like, if it just broke even, just my cost of nitrogen, what's that going to be like? And we went back on a 5-year rolling. Like, a couple years ago, we had some major nitrogen spikes. You do a 5-year rolling. That machine out there does about between 50 and 100,000 bucks worth of nitrogen a year with electricity and water, and it costs you about 1,200 bucks in electricity to run it. That's a big difference. And so from going back to the carbon type thing, on ours we did a little analysis on that. A lot of guys were asking us about the CO2 side, and we're like, we don't make any CO2, but what we do, except for the electricity maybe. But what we found is to make a pound of regular nitrogen, it takes over 9 pounds of CO2 to make it. Ours doesn't take any. So what the math is, basically you're saving about 2,000 pounds of CO2 if you use our stuff versus that, just by making it on your own farm. Not including you're saving a bunch of money. So going back to it, what is it? It's water. It's got all kinds of frequencies and radionics and other things in it. We don't even know how to quantify some of that stuff. It's super geek stuff. But it makes nitrate. We can see that. When we test it, it doesn't really show up because there's no salt in it. So you got to do all kinds of things to figure it out. We have little test strips. We put the test strip on it. If it's real purple, we're happy. We found out recently that it's not just that, but there's other ways we can test it. So we did a backdoor test with phosphorus. We found that although we couldn't get the exact nitrate number, we could get a number. And what we found was by tweaking the water a little bit, one way or the other on pH, this goes into water quality, it makes a huge difference. So if the water comes in, TDS is total dissolved solids, by the way. If you take dirt and you add it to water, you see the dirt specks in there, there's some TDS for you. But typically your water, even though you can't see it, most guys' water is about 450 TDS up to 600. The moon changes, it might go to 1,000. It's crazy how it works. We had no idea. When we send all over the country, we're like, hey, put it on your farm, plug it in and go. And all of a sudden they were like, the moon changes, we had like 10 guys calling us, hey, machine's clogged up. So what we found is not only does it clog it up, but there's a monitor of how it works. So kind of the rhythm is this. If we get the pH down, so the pH on most waters around between 6 and 9, 7 being an average, we want to get that down. So by using a reverse osmosis or rainwater, we can drop it. Rainwater is great. You guys have a lot of that here in Missouri, most of the time. But as it goes through, it'll keep it clean and it drops it. So one of the acids that's produced in the water is nitric acid that converts it into nitrate. So in the plants, they produce an acid and it finds N2 and it converts it and it becomes nitrate, goes in the plant. Ours is more efficient, goes right in the plant. So as we go down that road of trying to understand what we're doing here, this year we learned that we can tweak that a little bit, make 9 times more. That means it's stronger. We don't know how the energy stuff works so much. We do know that if you wait 20 minutes, it's less of one thing. If you let it sit there for a couple days, it ends up being a lot more. And that's the TDS on a different level. So here's the other kind of measurable that we're learning. This is just so if any of you guys have heard somebody good, bad, or ugly trying our stuff, the good ones had good water, the ugly ones had bad water, just how it works, we'll find that out. But as we've tried it, the high calcium, high pH water makes more nitrite, NO2. And that which converts into NO3 later, but isn't great for the plant because it takes longer to get it in there. And if you give it NO3 when it needs it, it goes right in the plant, or pretty much right in the plant. We're still understanding that too. Raise of hands, who thinks it's better to spray anything in the middle of the day? None of you. Raise your hands, who thinks it's better to spray something in the morning when the birds are singing? Most of you. How about at night when the bricks are running? Few. I thought maybe when the bricks are running it'd be best. Come to find out, it's in the morning when that dew's on there and those birds are singing. So when the birds are singing, spray. That's what we're learning. One thing we found about this too is, how many of you guys raise livestock? A bunch of you. Us too. So one of the things with livestock, the majority of why we raise all this stuff is to feed them, so that we can feed us. The 180 or so million acres of corn and soy in this country are pretty much to go into livestock that go into our bellies. That's how we feed more people. If we do that smarter, how does it work? So part of that is livestock. We found we're still working out the bugs, so don't shoot the messenger here. But we are adding it to feed, and when we add it to the feed, it makes it more digestible. We had a group of lambs that they had half as much feed on lower quality feed and gained the same just by adding it to the ration, and it costs almost nothing to make it. So that's kind of the next level. If a guy, we had a couple people here that tried it, but if you put it on pasture and you let a bunch of stock out on it, they will go there and eat that first every single time. Like, it's just the way it works. So there's something to that too. We know that it works on crops. We know that you can put on pasture. If you were to do that with urea, they'd be dead. That's just the way it works. You can only give them so much. Like, yes, we put it in some feeds, but if you put in more than 1% or so, it's a good way to lose some animals, especially sheep. They're pretty dumb. But going back to it, what we're working on is really trying to feed the world. It's not like hey, let's grow this business and sell it to some other outfit. We're past that idea. It's a legacy deal. We're doing this for the Lord. We're not doing it for people or for money. This is for everybody. So in that, right now we're in India. We got guys talking to those guys. They're looking at how they do things. They get an 85% or so subsidy in India for all their fertilizer. The average farmer has 2 acres, and they come get it and they put it on their place. This year they cut it back like 40%, so that means you got a lot of hungry people in the fastest growing population in the world. We're also going to Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and we're not going there to like, hey, we need to sell machines super fast. We're going there to test it so that when it's the opposite season of here, we know what to expect because we're still learning. We have about 300 farmers or so throughout the North America that's trying them, and we're still learning like what works. So in that, I know there's going to be a lot of questions, so we'll jump into the questions, and then we'll show you the machine, and then we got to get the truck and take off because I got to get to the airport to take in back to his cast off. No, dad stuff. Kids. If you're not pregnant, so you're not trying.
I'm going to start off with a question that I had asked actually yesterday. Storage.
Yep.
Is it corrosive, or do you have to have special storage provisions?
So far, we don't think so. We have seen different results in storage, and we're still trying to understand that. The energy in it is affected differently in some things than other, but for sure, and you got a little story around this, is if you put it in a clear container outside, you'll find out how much nitrogen is actually in it. You want to tell them about that?
Boy, I told you I make a lot of mistakes. So we had our
forward.
Yeah. So we got our tote after about the time we were replanting this corn, or our machine, and so we had it full. That's when the rain moved in, and so we moved it out to a 1,000-gallon tank that had only had water in it ever. And about 6 days later, I had the guys pumping it off, and they said, we got a problem. And it looked like August pond scum, that whole tank. And it was crystal clear. That was on a Monday, I believe. And on Friday, it was crystal clear. It's like, what happened? Now, we found out later we must have had something in there to help trigger it, but the biological activity there was off the charts. So we got to go support the local business in town and buy a 6,500-gallon black tank and bring it out and do that. So made the mistake. Don't make the mistake I did. So,
if you do a clear one, do it inside.
yes, do it inside. Yep. So.
Yes, sir.
What about metal storage tanks?
So far, we think metal's good, although the pH is low, under 4 ideally. We haven't seen any corrosive action. We've had guys put it through tractors, through rigs, through drones. We haven't seen any, but we're still learning. We do know that we've seen a couple tanks get a little bit more rust to the bottom of them when our stuff in it, but I think if anything's in a rust-filled tank, it's probably going to do that.
On this tank here, just a second, Seth. On the tank, part 2 of that question, I was asked earlier about freezing, and they asked about, are we worried about it in a metal tank in this zone roughly? What's your opinion on?
So in this zone, you guys, it freezes enough where it might freeze altogether. But the Canadians, which freeze most of the year, their whole thing is buy extra machines. I'm not trying to cite more machines, but they're going to do it just so that they have it during their season. But the guys that aren't are putting bubblers with a heater on the bottom so that it doesn't break their main valve. That's the main one that we've had. We've had the stink. the tank guys and their sales guys, they're going to say more of what you want to hear. But they said running 3 gallons in a circle, 3 gallons a
So
minute.
it's a continuous flow pump.
Yeah,
Circulation
they
pump.
said that's fine. That was in Ohio and in Michigan, and it's colder there, but it's that was one thing.
This is,
So this is just a foliar nitrogen application then?
Well,
Good question.
we thought it was primarily foliar before. This year we're learning a lot because farmers are like, well, you said it, I can do this, but and it doesn't burn it, so I'm just going to do whatever. So we had a guy put on 100 gallons white drop to once, and we're like, I don't know what's going to happen, like maybe nothing. And he said it looks beautiful. He did send us a picture with a yellow strip in the middle of it, and he's like, yeah, where I put 70 gallons and I sprayed it right on, it's a huge yellow strip. And then they looked at his picture from last year, realized it flooded last year, and he's like, oh, it flooded this year too. So it wasn't the yellow strip, but that was one that we were worried about. His water wasn't great; it was making more nitrite than it was nitrate. But it seems to be this. We've gotten higher. We've done all kinds of tests from some universities. It's mostly guys like us, like just trying stuff. But the fertility goes through the roof. The seed tends to sprout better when our stuff's on it. So if you put it on right as you put the seeds in the ground, you're good. Then we think hitting it one more time or up to four times, maybe a little bit more, with anywhere from 10 to 20 gallons at a time is good. We had a guy out here, Kendall Wagner. He's in kind of dry Kansas. I mean, super dry Kansas, 3-year drought. He called us over the weekend. And he said, "So I just got to let you know, I droned it on 50 gallons in the middle of the day, 90 degrees. Probably shouldn't have done that." And I'm like, "That's a lot of droning with a gallon of molasses." He said it burnt it. I'm like, well, "How did it burn it?" But I guess something with just that time of day anyway is going to singe it. A couple days later, it greened up. It looked beautiful. He did it one more time. He had put it on when it was belly button deep and it was yellow and it didn't look good. He just beat. So in his area, their insurance is 100 bushel. He just beat his conventional by 4 bushel with that. So he's looking at his cost and he's like, why would I ever go back to the other stuff? If anything, a mixture, but that was kind of where. But he did it only foliar. So we've had both where we've done guys with just foliar and in the dirt. I think a little bit of both is good. We're still learning. Now this year we're going to find out like time of day. If your water's not great, then get it good, and then you may not need near as much. We had a guy in North Dakota. He had started with 28, so he had a little bit of the ground from that, and then he couldn't get in the ground because it was so wet up there, opposite of the Kansas guy, and it was around the last week of May where he came in and he put all his corn in about the same time you did, right? Your second round, and then we went over there July 17th and it was this tall. I'm like, how is that even possible? It grew that much, and he said. He's like, I'm like, that's green lighting, you sure? Like, you didn't put something else on it? He's like, I only put 25 gallons of your stuff on this, 50 gallons of your stuff on this, and then a bunch more 28 on all this. He's like, I can't tell the difference on none of it. And he called me 3 times in one day, and usually when that happens, somebody's got a problem. And I'm like, Zane, can you call that, please? I don't want to deal with this. No, but no, he called up, I called it back, and he's like, I need to buy 10 machines. He's like, I got 8,000 acres, and my brother's got it. He's like, if this is working the way it is, my whole community needs this stuff. And that was one of those like, oh, that was nice. And his water was decent. He was going like 3 months and had no water problems. And all of a sudden, his water changed, and he called us and he's like, actually, I got a problem. So we had to go fix his problem. But what we learned out of that is when the water's right and he puts it on at the right time, we're going to have really good results on. Your cost on 25 gallons is like 20 cents in electricity. It's almost nothing. So when you're getting that kind of yield, like that's pretty significant. So that was one of our good ones. We had another one. Zane could probably talk about it more than I could, but Pennsylvania farmer. There in Pennsylvania, they beat them up pretty hard for spraying anything. Like they'll stop with their beamers in front of their tractor and like protest and jump up and down. And so this one guy's like, okay, now when they come up and I'm getting ready to spray your stuff, what do I say? It's water. Like you can drink it. They're going to be happy. You could use it on organic stuff. And so he did. And he was like, yay, they're finally not mad at me. They're letting me spray on the fields I need to. And so he called up and he ordered 2 machines. He got them. He ran for 3 weeks. He started seeing a significant jump. He drove out to Kentucky and got 2 more. And then he called us up and he's like, I need 4 more of the newer ones with higher output. He's like, this is amazing. But he said his corn is the best it's ever looked on that piece of ground. and he's never had corn look like that before. And not saying they're all good. We've had some ugly ones too. Don't get me wrong. But it was just one of those like when it works amazing. When the water, and that's what it comes back to if water quality's not right. So going back to water quality, and I don't care if it's our machine or not. If you're putting water through your spray rig, and you've got extra minerals, extra sulfur, extra iron, extra calcium, extra bicarbonates, 100% you are not utilizing your biologicals or your chemicals the way that you should. You are throwing money down the drain. Get an RO, use rainwater, keep it clean. You're gonna have a significantly better crop, and you're gonna use a lot less chemicals. And that's my goal on the organic side, get rid of the chemical side. But I think we're like 7 to 10 years from being a merge between conventional and organic. Like the future is going to be that we just raise things smarter, and we do it with less chemicals, and we can grow a lot more nutritious food on the for everybody. So that's my basics.
Yeah. Like, oh, I see a hand in the back.
What's the price on the machines? I guess you have different size machines.
We do, yeah. So we've got.
Contact literature for us.
We do. We've got some sheets back here, so we guys come take a peek at the machine. Take a peek. We have a huge machine for 1.5 million. So anybody wants to sign up for that, raise your hand. But it does. It'll do like 30,000 acres. We're going to put a credit card thing on it, so if a guy wants to, his buddies to come up and fill it up, they'll be able to. That's kind of a cool one we're working on. We've got another one down. It's a 20-foot storage container. It'll do it's $850,000, and it'll do around 180 gallons an hour. So a lot difference from those first days with Joe. And then the next set down is we've got another one that does, it's about $300,000, so 70 modules, so about 50 gallons an hour. And then we've got this one out here, and ones that are just like it. This one is not the new technology piece we have. This is kind of like a 1960s model. You turn it on and it goes until it doesn't go. Then you got to go fix it every once in a while. I personally like that better because I'm like I hate technology. I got to use it, but I hate technology. The other one is the technology one. If your pH isn't right, your TDS isn't right, it's too hot, you're having no flow problems, it will text you, email you, call your rep, and have somebody over there to fix that sucker like in a day. Like that's the next level of technology. The cool thing is that works, and there'll always be problems with that too. But we could also manage and monitor how much we're making. We don't really truly understand the true nitrogen nitrate levels. We do know that when you test the soil, we do not lose a bunch in the rainwater. We don't have a lot of runoff. It does go in the plant. When we do test it in the plant, as you'll see out there, you're getting the same levels of nitrate, but it looks like if you were to take it to the lab, you're at like 1,000 times less than what if you were to weigh it at your regular UAN. So it doesn't work the same. It is different. But that's kind of the basics. So, and the smallest one, so the other one's 45,000 with the new technology piece on it. RO is about $3,000. We say, we'll sell to you for cost because you need to have one of those. The next one's 38,500. That's the one that's out here. Derek's got one. We've got a few guys in here with that. And then we have a small one that's kind of fun to try. You got one of those, right? It's an $8,500 model. Sometimes it's more of a pain in the butt than it's worth because it's small and you got to put it to the side. But it'll do small crop stuff. So anywhere from, like we got a guy in Jamaica that's got 8.5 acres of vegetables, and he keeps on doing it year round, and that's good for him. We got some Amish guys in a couple different parts of the world that are doing it, and it works for their size farms for like 80 to 100 acres. And then we've got guys that are like, they get one and they get another one, and they're like, forget it, just give me a big one. So what we do in that aspect is, guys, a small one, he wants to upgrade, we just take whatever dollars he has, and he can put that towards his next one. So a lot of guys are getting their $38,000 ones now. 38.5 ones, and then going to the 45 because you get more output. We're also going to more concentrate too. Yes, sir. We can. Yep. So far the only thing we've seen that we've had a little bit of a problem with, we're not even sure why, is sulfur. We had guys mix it with sulfur and put it on in Canada and in Pennsylvania. Similar guys, wet and cold on wheat. They both had the same yields as almost nothing. It wasn't a great year for them anyways, but it didn't really work. In fields next door, they didn't do that. They did it at different times. They worked a lot better. We had bigger bumps in yields, and they were happy. But what we found was that was a major issue. Was the sulfur we think was buffering it. We think maybe it's a pH thing. We're not quite sure. Maybe when we get lower pH, it doesn't affect it. We don't know. But that's the one thing. We know with biologicals, it amplifies it. We know that get higher biological activity also when we just add our stuff to the ground. We're still trying to understand why. But we also had a guy that he mixed it with Roundup. He only needed a third as much Roundup after he realized that he burnt his Roundup Ready corn with it. So it did amplify it or make it hotter. If that's the case, that means you need less of that too. So we're still trying to understand it. We had a guy that we say foliar. If you put it in your tank and you've got 50 gallons of 28 left over, and you have a 3,000 gallon tank, and you go to spray it on the field, it'll burn the field. It won't kill it, but we found that out too. So by itself, it doesn't burn anything. But if you put it with something that's already naturally hot, it's gonna affect the crop. So you got to know when to put it on and not to. Still learning that.
There's no guarantee analysis of what needs to.
No, the only thing we've done is, and this is before we made it more concentrated, is we found that every crop that we did across the board, from wheat to potatoes to corn to you name it, whenever we did a side-by-side trial on the same dirt, that ours worked just like 2 pounds of N for every gallon of product that we used on every single thing. We had a couple of guys that had bad water, it was more like 1.5. We had guys that when they tweaked it up, and that's what we were doing now, it amplified it. So now we're more like 3 pounds per gallon, but it's not actual pounds of N, it's equivalent pounds of N. So it's just making it more reusable. I know you guys got more questions. What's that?
What's the production of that one back here again?
That one's 100 gallons a day, so it makes equivalent of 300 pounds of N. So if you're used to, going by your pounds of units, go off of that. So for every day it runs, it costs you about $2, $3 to run it. So if you're at 12 cents a kilowatt here, it's going to cost about $1,200 a year to run it. So you guys know. So if you decide to run it for half that much, you got kind of figure your math on backwards. But either way you look at it, you're still at a penny a pound for your any equivalent. Yes, sir.
Matter where you run your daylight hours, all at night,
No.
hours a day.
No, the only thing we found is water quality is our main issue. We did high humidity in Florida. The only problem we had with any kind of humidity is if you have dust and humidity at the same time, it'll clog up your air compressor, which that would work out with anybody. I'm sure you guys have that issue with your tractors. So that's something we deal with. But basically, humidity, time of day, doesn't matter. We thought because you make, a lot of people don't think about this, but the trees they take CO2 and turn into oxygen during the day, but they do the opposite at night. You think that maybe that affects it, but it doesn't. It's such a small amount that it's pulling out. It doesn't really matter. We did it in North Idaho at high elevations, and we did it at sea level, and it was all the same as far as what we found there. Our biggest variable by far has been water, and that's it, or the minerals that are in the water.
This guy's been very patient with me this year. We've had to clean machines and figure that out. And
I think he's been more patient with me. We got us figuring this out.
Oh,
He doesn't have to do
yeah.
that.
But I will tell you, water quality. By the way, little side note, about $2.50 a day is what it's costing me to run mine on our electric co-op.
Okay.
Here. Just
Good
to give
enough.
you an idea.
Yeah.
So, yes, question right there.
When you were raising tomatoes, you were putting a gallon or whatever on. What happens if you put 5 gallons? Do you burn it?
It grows more green stuff and less fruit. What we found was we had this crazy thing happen. So we had in our underground greenhouse, it's about 1,300 square foot or so, about 17 foot tall, but it's south facing and it's in the dirt. And so we had those tomatoes, and I thought it'd be fun just keep on spraying them, see what would happen. And I had some of them that grew so high that it blacked out the rest of the greenhouse and all that stuff started dying. And then I don't know if you guys most of y'all raise some squash, but there's a type of squash called a kabocha squash. It's an Asian squash, and has a little seed about like that. I put 2 of those seeds inside the greenhouse, and then a month and a half later, they were growing 2 foot at a time when I sprayed the stuff on there. And it was like, I don't know if you guys ever watched some of those movies where the plants are taking over the people. It was one of those things. Like it took over the entire thing. It got so big. The only problem was I didn't have any bugs inside of my greenhouse, so although it flowered like crazy, there was nothing to pollinate it. So I learned that later, but you could not get from one side of the greenhouse to the other, not even belly crop for that thing. It just went everywhere. 2 seeds took over that whole thing, but I sprayed it like 4 times in a month. And so I think there is maybe too much vegetative growth sometimes. On corn, we haven't seen that where we had too much green. We had one guy in Indiana that thought maybe that. wheat, we were a little worried about it because too much straw. So you're not making money off the straw usually, and so that was one of those like figured out. We haven't seen that much of a difference. Like it's been kind of steady. Like what we found is if anything, ours takes a little bit longer to get to where it needs to be. Like it doesn't turn as green, and Derek might see different in it, but it takes like 11 to 13 days longer for you to see that pop and kind of green. But if you look at the roots, they're always a lot bigger with ours than they are with anything else. Ours are typically 10 or 15 days longer where it's green. Potato guys were like, yes, I'm so glad because it makes such a big difference. At the same time, they're like, I got to harvest these things. So I got to knock it down first. So that's why we got the extra yield on potatoes. Cut heel samples, potatoes, 28 fell off. Ours hockey sticked. We got 2 more weeks of production on those, and we're finding that on a lot of stuff. Like that guy in Kansas did it. He's like, I should have waited another week, probably because I would have got more yield, but I was just getting too anxious. And I got to get ready for wheat and all that kind of stuff. So, you want to talk a little bit about yours?
About the corn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You planted yours in the Sawgeese part of the whole farm, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So it looked great. Everything went like I expected. And like I said, it's one thing to look at it, but I wanted to have some results prior to harvest. I'm analytical like that. And and I sent him some pictures there end of June, 1st of July. We were making one of the applications, and I'm very happy with how even everything looked. The sap test, like I shared earlier, 3.01 to 4.5 is kind of the ideal range. And with the Green Lightning, it was either 3.5 something or 3.6 something, so it was right in the money. Plant health, though, it looked great. One thing I didn't get done because I was just so bummed getting back from vacation, everything hitting, but I wish I would have pulled a bricks test because that's probably one of the best feedbacks I've gotten from guys that I've worked with. I know Josh had to leave earlier, but he got just a single unit, and he said, yep, look me up whenever fall hits. I'm getting the bigger unit. And once he understood some more about how it works, the thing I get until I'm blue in the face, and that's fine, and you got to ask questions. People always say, well, what's the analysis? We're not sidestepping anything on that. We're just being honest. There's not an analysis. You have to understand equivalency. So, for example, you can get in a truck and drive to Kansas City, or we can fly to Kansas City, right? Both of them are going to get you there, but they're two totally different everythings, right? Different fuels, different everything, but they're both going to get you there. So you have to understand that what we found, depending on potency, 50, 60, 100 gallon will get you there just like 200 units of nitrogen. And so, yes, it's there, but if you really start figuring it, matter of fact, it'll just make you scratch your head when you really figure the nitrogen level in there. How is this even working? But, and I don't know if he wants to go into it today, but there's just so much more to it than just the nitrogen. Yeah. And that's what makes that product unique.
Yeah, that was one of the geek things. We'll go with you guys first.
Can you soil apply this or just trickle foliar? Or can you
you can do anything with it.
Can I tackle that for a second?
Yeah,
I want to hear what you have to say because this is what I've been telling people when I talk to them.
Yep.
Around here, we go out in the fall or spring, we go put on our 100 and some, 200 units of anhydrous, right? I would not recommend doing that. I think it's going to leach out, volatilize, be gone. If that's what you want to do, it may not be your product. However, if you want to go in there and do it maybe right prior to planting, I still wouldn't do it all. I'd still spoon feed it. But just simply by using it as carrier water with your herbicide passes and with any foliars you might do, right there we're going to hit our target. Yeah. That's my opinion. Fly drops will work great. We've seen that work great. We've seen regular side dressing work great. I'm working with a 20-inch corn guy. He's trying to figure out how he's going to do that because he really needs to get it on ahead or later, right? So we're figuring that stuff out. But anyway.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of different options with that. I'll get into this and we'll go with you, sir. We found that if you put it on with a seed, about 15 gallons or so per acre, and now it would be 10 because it's more concentrated, but so 10 gallons per acre, we're getting higher germination rates out of the gate on all things. So wheat, corn, soy. When guys did analysis and they soaked their 28 and ours in their seeds and see what would happen in about 5 days, all the 28 killed all of them except for one. Ours grew significantly better. So that's something that we're like, okay, if we get higher germination, does that mean more corn in the field? Yeah, probably. It also turns the genes on a little bit. We're trying to understand that. It's an epigenetic effect. Then hitting it again when it's like for wheat, it's it's about 8 inches high. Seems like it does something good for it. A couple of guys, they put 28 in it because they didn't have enough, and it looked like we were about the same. on corn, we think it needs about 4 to 5 doses, depending on which way you do it, which is about your application rate plus 1 maybe. And but what we found was the later you put it on, the more you get. So a lot of guys think you need to front load it. It's actually the opposite. You're putting it out when it needs it. Like when you do a bricks analysis, you're like, oh, I probably need to get the bricks up. I should go hit it once. And we're doing some leaf analysis with that too, trying to figure that out. Is on the fly we could see where the plant's at. We've got some really good sap analysis from quite a few farmers. One guy in Canada is doing it every day because he wants to prove that it works. He's doing it every day, so we'll have a good idea of what it looks like. But if we can give it to it when it needs it instead of just front loading it, it's going to get in the plant a lot better. It may not work as good in the dirt like a normal salt-based one, just because of how it works. But it is making more P and K and more micronutrients available in that plant when we test it. Although ours is basically an N-type product, it is doing something extra. When mixed with biologicals, it amplifies all that. So that's been kind of cool to see. Sir, you had a question back there? Oh, okay.
Good.
What's the lifespan of this spray on?
So,
Volatile, doing it nice 20 hours, days?
yeah, so it's a good question. What his question is it volatile? Does it go away? So typical urea is NO2, NO3, and kind of a combination with ammonia, right? So when you mix all those together, ammonia goes back in the air. If you don't use it quick, it's gone. NO2, nitrite, does the same thing, or it converts if it gets in the soil quick enough. NO3, from what we're learning, goes down and it keeps on going down. It goes in and it stays there, or it'll wash away. Ours doesn't seem to wash away as much because it grabs a hold of something before it gets there. But that's where we're trying to understand, the volatility. If we get our pH right in our tank, it's kind of like yogurt. Anybody made yogurt before? You got to get your pH just right, or it'll last a week if you don't, or it could last for 3 months if it's just right. And that's kind of what we're finding here is if we can get our pH because our TDS is right and all that down below 4, it's stable. We've not seen it go sideways at that point. If we made it and it's high minerals and it's higher pH, it's more nitrite, and the nitrite with the calcium that's in the water naturally brings it up, and eventually it goes away. And so what we're learning is although the machine makes it right out of the chamber when you see it over there, it actually doesn't just do it in the chamber, but it also is doing it in the tank because the air that's going in there, it's slowly working its way through all the water that's there for a couple days, and when you kick it out. So how we're testing that, and this is kind of our new way of testing it, this is kind of like what, if you were to talk to somebody in 1850, you're going to say, hey, there's going to be a gadget, you can pay your bills, and you can watch TV, which I don't know what that was, but you can talk to people all over the world, they think you're crazy. That's kind of what this is. What we're testing now is the TDS. TDS by itself is going to be like dirt and water, but ours is going from like a BB to a marble to a tennis ball inside there. Not actual size, but that kind of gives you an idea. What's happening is as the gases in the air are getting around the water, it's slowly getting bigger inside there, and when that goes into the plant, it tends to go in better with the more that it has in there. Now, if the water wasn't so good, we're finding it does the opposite. So we have a TDS going from 50 to 100 out of the machine, 200 to 250 in the machine, and after a couple of days, we've got guys at 450. We did have a guy the other day at 10,000, and we realized he was making algae. So, food for thought on that one. But that's kind of what we're looking at is trying to understand what those levels are. But what we are finding is it's not volatile if you get the pH right. And that's what right now we thought we could just sell a piece of equipment like a tractor or a well, and like it just works. We have to go by and help the farmers figure it out in these stages to make sure the water's doing what it's doing to make sure everybody's happy. So part of when we sell a machine is you're probably going to have some happy-go-lucky farm tech guy stop by, making sure that you guys are you're getting what you're supposed to be out of our machine. Otherwise, it's not good for either one of us.
What's the shelf life on your end product? Storage for 6 months. Water quality or what?
Well, yeah, it does depend on water quality and pH. We had some and it wasn't even that great a pH, but Joe had it last for over 3 years. I had it for like 18 months, and it was still good. And I froze it, I cooked it, I beat it up. We think this new stuff is going to last a lot longer because it's more concentrated, but we're not quite sure. But it should last years. But I think it'll come back to the tank We do think there's other things we could do to the tank to make it so it'll amplify a little bit more. We're playing with it a little bit, trying to figure that out. But it's also, some guys are mixing it with stuff. We don't know if mixing with stuff is a good thing or a bad thing. So we're trying to figure out that too. And also the type of tank. Injected through an irrigator works good. We had a guy in Arizona do that through a subterranean drip, and he ended up with the same results as he did with liquid fish and aminos. So that's pretty significant difference in cost savings, and it worked pretty good. What's that? Over the top, it works good. We did not think it would work in a pivot, and this goes back to a weird energy thing we're trying to figure out. Because it's such a small amount, and you've got millions of gallons going out on that pivot for a week or whatever. Would it possibly work at 600 gallons a minute type thing? And that guy in North Dakota that I told you about that had a really good success, he had some extra, and he had a buddy that wanted to try it, so he did half of his circle with it, as his corn didn't look so good, and half of it without. The half with it all has its leaves and green all the way down. The other side of it lost its bottom leaves and fired up and dropped. And he said ours looks significantly better, and he only put 25 gallons on through that pivot. So that's one of those things where we didn't think it'd work with the pivot, but it does. As far as small sprinkle stuff, I've done some personally, and we've had a few people do it in like greenhouses, and hydroponics doesn't seem to work so far, but maybe it does. We don't know yet. We're still trying to figure it out because the water we used wasn't great, but it's also making a little bit of hydrogen peroxide. We make a lot of hydrogen peroxide when we're doing the wrong thing. So because of that, naturally, it's basically air and water. Just it's doing something else to it. Yes, sir.
What's the life expectancy of the machine? And I mean, it's kind of like solar panels. They promote solar panels. You lose so much every year.
Yeah.
Length of time then it's shot.
Well, I'll tell you, solar panels are another one of my pain points. I put in 90 of those suckers, and I was so happy in the summertime, and I was so mad in the wintertime when I needed the electricity, because where we live in North Idaho, we don't see the sun but an hour a day. But going back to ours, because we're farmer focused, we're not just like a big company trying to promote something and try to turn it over. Our goal is to make it like a 20-year, 30-year type machine. This one, it's a 2-week machine if you have really bad water. But we have a 3-year warranty on it. But if you have really good water, then it should go 20, 30 years, no problems. We have a new one coming out that's all stainless, so you can literally shoot it, and it still wouldn't do anything. And that one, how we're setting it up is if you put your, we'll call it the brain, in your shop, and you have these outside, they should just go as long as you possibly want them to go. But the short answer is we don't know. We're still trying to figure it out. I think if somebody were to say in 1995 that a cell phone is going to last for 20 years, you tell them that they're crazy, and you realize that they only last as long as you dropped in for the pigs to eat it.
I just, like I said, I know it's just pretty young in the stages when you're working at it.
Yeah.
But it's just an idea. I know a lot of times they put a life expectancy on something,
Yeah.
And it's just a general idea.
Well, so many of the components are simple to replace, repair, and they're inexpensive for the most part.
Yeah.
And even the parts that aren't, would be a whole lot less than the machine. So I've had the privilege of tearing mine apart many times and coached others how to do it, and it's not hard. I think that's what I love about it. It's easy to work on.
But the biggest thing that we know is definitely consumable is the air compressor. You can't use a regular air compressor because the oil in it will cause problems. It makes the air funky. But ours how it works will last a long time. They say it'll last 2 to 4 years. I'm a farmer. Like if anything, everything in my farm breaks faster than anything else because I push everything super hard. But they're $200, so it's not. It's like, you're gonna spend $200 and you can change out yourself. It's really that big a deal. That's kind of where we're at. You rest up.
What about running it through twice?
So in the old days, like 4 days ago, I would have told you that it doesn't work, because Joe told me it was kind of like cheese. You make it once, and then it is what it is. Otherwise, it becomes something different. Zane proved me wrong, my son. He's like, Dad, I'm going to try to run it through twice and see what happens. What happened?
It got more potent.
It got stronger. So we're like, okay, well, now we can go through a drone. You have to put it on. You have to drone it for an hour.
Well, for like tank size,
well, that's it, yeah.
20, 30,000 gallon storage.
Now, run it through 3 times didn't do it. And we also don't know, does that scramble the energy to make it weird? So far, 2 was fine. And that's what that's why we're honing it down, and we're maximizing it. We're trying to get as much as we possibly can out of it. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at today. Is that it's you can go through it twice for what we've seen. but we haven't tried it we have not tried it with the water that wasn't great to see if it did the same thing or not. Or it might even make that water better, I don't know. So that's one of our projects we were talking about this week is let's run through as many times as possible and see if we can kill some plants. So what happens?
Okay. If there's no other questions, give Travis a hand for sharing this with us.
Thank y'all.
I know he's got to pull out pretty soon, but if there's anything you got to want to take a look or something, they'll be pulling out here in a little bit. But
Yeah, if you guys want to come over, take a peek at it for a few minutes so we can walk you through what it is, that'd probably be a good thing to do. And then from there, we're going to load up and I got to get on a plane in like 5 hours in Des Moines, Iowa. So, that's it.
guys, that's what we've got today. You guys might have seen Trey bouncing around. If you've seen some of the videos on TikTok and Facebook, he's the magic mind behind that. And Trey, thank you for doing that.
Thanks, Greg. Blessing to know y'all. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
What sits in there is really
with the process, when you're running that water through, it makes a bridge, and that throws off your conductivity, and then it makes the product's oak at about 3 pounds of in equivalent per gallon product. It's 1,100 watts, so it's about $1,200 to run it for the entire year. This unit's $38,500.
They all use reverse osmosis, right?
That's ideal. Yeah, you can use rainwater. If you have a really good well with low total dissolved solids, that works too, which is rarely ever in the Midwest or here.
How much water does it take to make it 100